conservative thought.
So I can speak loudly, and I'm sure I'm right.
She can definitely hear you.
So
I can hear you, yeah.
It should be on.
yeah. One. Okay.
Yeah.
So, as a cognitive neuroscientist and as a social psychologist, one of the things that we have to do a lot, given the popularity of neuroscience recently, is speak to journalists. And it's very difficult for scientists usually to speak to journalists because I think they have two very different goals. Journalists want headlines, they want to be able to say what's the take-home message from the research. And as scientists, we're primarily concerned with the caveats. Why is this not necessarily always the case? And so when you look specifically at neuroscience research, those caveats multiply exponentially. And there are a number of assumptions we make in the way we conduct our studies. There are a number of implications that our results may have, but also may not have, depending upon future research, which may be 2 or 3 years away from the current study and the investigation. And so when you begin to think about political neurosciences or the differences you observe between liberals and conservatives, those differences are always subject to revision. And as scientists, that makes us very uncomfortable giving you a tagline, giving you a take-home message, because it's something that may have to be revised in a year or 2 or 3. The other issue is that even if we see differences in the brain, for instance, that does not necessarily mean that these differences are hardwired. The brain is one of the most flexible aspects of our organism. It's one of the most flexible parts of our biology. And things that show up in the brain don't necessarily mean that you're approaching the topic in a deterministic way. And so the brain is able to learn new things, it's able to be flexible, it's able to change a point of view, and there's still lots of research that we're currently doing to try to figure out what some of these differences are. And so, for instance, in my own research, I study social cognition, or how we figure out what other people are thinking about. And specifically, I focus on a phenomenon called dehumanization, the ability to fail to consider someone else's thoughts. But our position on dehumanization over the last 7 or 8 years of research has continually changed as new research becomes available, as new data becomes available. And so a position I might have taken 5 years ago isn't necessarily the position I'll take today. And so the sort of first point I want to make is that you have to take all of this research that's coming out with a grain of salt. You have to be careful in how you interpret the data, because just because you see pretty brain pictures doesn't mean something's hardwired. And so I can observe differences between liberals and conservatives, let's say, but that may be specific to the particular task that I use to probe those differences. And if I used a different task, those differences might fade away. And so the conclusions we're able to draw from neuroscience research are tenuous at best, particularly in this very nascent stage of the research process. And so I'll let Keith now say a couple things about social psychology.